Good evening, you're watching News Mongolia on MNB World. For our top stories, the government plans to advance 14 mega projects and focuses on major investment agreements. Mongolia enhances law enforcement training with the Mendez principles to prevent torture. Mongolia highlights contribution to UN peacekeeping operations. For other news, stay tuned. The regular cabinet meeting was held on September 11th. The head of the Cabinet Secretariat, Ochrul, provided details on the implementation of the government's action program during the press briefing. Details are as follows.
The government's action program includes 14 mega projects, with plans underway to regulate the reforms that have already generated significant expectations within society. Official instructions were given to the ministers, establishing priorities for these projects. Notably, negotiations are ongoing to prioritize the construction of the Kashun-Sukhat border railway, finalize an investment agreement with the French company Orano Mining, and progress with the construction of 2 power plants, all of which will be submitted to Parliament in due time. A meeting in Beijing with a representative of the French Orano Mining Company regarding the investment agreement has taken place. We have reached an understanding on approximately 200 proposals that differ in principle, though there are 6 proposals that remain unresolved. During President Hursukh's state visit to France, the protocol was signed and over 420 proposals were added to the initial 223. Since then, 6 sub-working groups have been actively engaged. The Prime Minister has now instructed the government to conduct a risk assessment regarding environmental concerns and ensure that investors share responsibility for these risks. As of today, mutual understandings has been reached on 51% of the draft agreement. Under this agreement, Mongolia will hold 51% of the ownership with preferential rights, while the French side will cover 100% of the financing. Ochrul emphasized the importance of addressing inflation concerning mineral royalties. The timeline for this project spans 40 years, with 30 years dedicated to mining and 10 years to rehabilitate the environment, presenting a significant benefit for Mongolia. The government's action program also prioritizes finalizing the investment agreement with Orano Mining, the investor behind the joint Mongolian-French venture Batrach Energy. Mongolia will own 10% of the preferential shares and receive dividends, making this a key project for economic growth. 3 international consulting firms have been involved in advising the government on the investment agreement with Orano Mining, providing specific recommendations. The Minister of Environment and Climate Change is responsible for environmental matters. The Minister of Industry and Mineral Resources oversees mining issues. The Minister of Finance handles tax-related matters, and the First Deputy Prime Minister leads on investment-related matters. 6 sub-working groups are set to consolidate their conclusions and reach a consensus by early October. Ochrul also indicated plans to visit a similar project in Kazakhstan to familiarize themselves with the process before concluding negotiations. The investment agreement with Orano Mining will first be submitted to Parliament for approval. Additionally, amendments to the law on minerals and the law on nuclear energy will be required. In particular, the ownership of 10% of the preferred shares will necessitate legal revisions. According to officials, the government of Mongolia is pushing forward with large-scale projects that are expected to make significant contributions to the economy. Given the time constraints, the government aims to initiate all 14 mega projects before the end of the year.
A new training session focuses on adapting Mendez's principles for effective interviewing in law enforcement and investigative procedures in Mongolia has been organized to improve criminal justice practices.
The training was hosted by the Standing Committee on Justice of the Parliament of Mongolia and the National Preventive Mechanism of Mongolia, which aims to bolster the capabilities of Mongolian law enforcement officers. The event, in collaboration with the International Association for the Prevention of Torture, emphasizes the localization of the Mendez principles to enhance interviewing techniques and information gathering during investigations. Key figures attending the training include Zochtbatter, Member of Parliament and Chairman of the Standing Committee on Justice, Zilman, Member for the Prevention of Torture, and Ben Buckland, Senior Advisor at the Association for the Prevention of Torture.
The more respect is expressed towards Mongolia, the more cautious Mongolian government should become with regard to this issue. Because when you are lenient and when you think you're good, that's when the problem may, occur without your knowledge and because of your lenience and less attention to the issue. So therefore, again, that is a very good reason when people say that Mongolian human rights records are high. That is a very good reason why Mongolia should be even more careful about human rights. Now, when it comes to torture, the problem is this: very often, the concept of torture in the convention is pretty wide. Therefore, but in Mongolian translation, for example, it's translated in a narrow sense. Then, when the practitioners use the convention, they use it in Mongolian, in that narrow sense, without understanding that there are more, acts that may constitute violation of the convention. And they, without realizing it, may be engaging into this illegal, prohibited activities. Therefore, one of the ideas that I was saying today at the seminar is that more academic research needs to be done. More precision should be applied in, using these international terms in Mongolia. You cannot have this easy approach to international norms. And therefore, starting from simple translation of the provisions, there has to be a lot more work done in terms of further research and academic study of the issue. And that will later on translate into practice. Then the record of Mongolia will be higher. And understanding the fact that we're not perfect and being humble enough that even without our knowledge we may be crossing the international lines, the international norms, that will be helping Mongolia to be better compliant with international standards. And there is more. Actually, what I'm saying is that our national standards should be higher than international standards.
So the Mendez principles are really a framework for enhancing the implementation of fundamental safeguards, including access to a lawyer, contact with the family, appropriate documentation of custody, for example, in Mongolia, as well as the replacement of confession-based interrogations with a rapport-based interviewing. And what's really key about this is that it helps to protect the human rights and the dignity of people who are detained, while also allowing the police to be more effective and more professional. So I think what is great in Mongolia is that you've already made some very important steps forward, including by establishing one of the first effective national preventive mechanisms in the region. And Principle 6 of the Mendez Principles is about oversight. So you've already made a big step here. And this afternoon we'll be talking more with the detaining authorities here about other small gaps and how we can help to fill them. But you've already made some good steps forward.
For the past 2 years, the National Action Mechanism for the Prevention of Torture has been actively working and organizing preventive measures. This system is currently being established in Mongolia. Although efforts to combat torture have been ongoing, this is the first time a dedicated mechanism has been put in place. This development represents a genuine commitment to fulfilling our international obligations and is a crucial component of the broader human rights framework. We present our annual torture prevention report to the Standing Committee on Justice, which also serves to inform the public about the annual situation regarding torture prevention in Mongolia.
The session is attended both online and in person by prosecutors, detectives, investigators, and human rights trainers from the capital and all 21 provinces. The Mendez principles focus on strengthening human rights protections by preventing torture and inhumane treatment within law enforcement and investigative practices. The training is part of ongoing efforts to integrate these principles into Mongolia's legal framework.
Now let's take a look at Mongolia's current affairs.
On September 9th, the United Nations Security Council held an open discussion on strengthening United Nations peacekeeping missions, organized under Slovenia's presidency for the month. Akbayar Nyamdorj, Mongolia's permanent representative to the United Nations, delivered a statement emphasizing the nation's ongoing commitment to United Nations peacekeeping efforts. He highlighted the participation of 20,000 Mongolian soldiers, including 1,500 female peacekeepers, in operations over the past 2 decades. Akbayar introduced a project aimed at supporting peacekeepers and their families while reaffirming Mongolia's strong support for United Nations Resolution 1325 and the United Nations Secretary-General's Peacekeeping Initiative. He also expressed Mongolia's intention to increase the role of women in future peacekeeping missions. Akbayar stressed the need for clear and more realistic mandates for peacekeeping missions, ensuring the safety of peacekeepers and providing essential funding, training, and technology to enhance their effectiveness. The open discussion initiated by Slovenia was chaired by Slovenia's permanent representative to the United Nations, Samuel Spoger, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, United Nations Deputy Secretary-General for Peacekeeping Operations, along with representatives from over 70 member states that contributed to this session. Member states involved in peacekeeping missions actively participated, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The head of the Office of the President of Mongolia, Zandan met with representatives led by Miroslav Bobek, director of the Prague Zoo, to discuss expanding cooperation regarding wildlife conservation. Key topics included the ongoing Przewalski's horse reintroduction project and efforts to strengthen environmental protection. Zandan expressed his gratitude for the Prague Zoo's 30-year commitment to the project in the Kov Nature Reserve, highlighting improvements in conservation efforts, research, and personal training. Plans include conducting ecosystem assessments, providing expert advice, and introducing innovative conservation methods. The zoo is also preparing to reintroduce Przewalski's horses in the Sumihala Gorge of the Numruk Reserve of Khalkhol-Som. Since 1998, the number of Przewalski's horses in Mongolia has increased through collaborative projects, particularly in areas like the Hostang Mountains.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you on Friday with more stories and updates. Please follow MNB World on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.